Sandstone Eco Zoo is back today with a new expansion, not just in terms of enclosures, but also in our animal population. Our penguins have been busy and the zoo has welcomed two babies, Aqua and Cyan. So cute and fuzzy. Our dingo pair has also welcomed two new cubs, Miri and Boo, and I'm so excited to see our pack grow. But we will also be seeing some new animals today in this space behind the dingo backstage. Let's go. Hey everyone, Sparrow here. As we get started with the cassowary building, what you're watching is my third attempt at designing this because I built it way too small the first time, and then the second time around Planet Zoo crashed on me. So this is the third attempt. Trying to stick with the conservation theme using the 3D printed walls and also some recycled metal girders to decorate the exterior with. Also lining the inside of the building with some painted brick because I figured that would be easier to clean than the texture of the 3D printed walls. We're going for lighter and earthier tones for this building because I really want the green of the tropical plants we'll be using to shine through. I'm also adding a viewing window in here, but it won't actually go through to the cassowary backstage. That will be at the very far side of the building, so stick around to see what items I have planned for this educational space in between. For the entrance, I was once again so thankful for the glass doors. These are seriously one of the best pieces in the game at the moment, in my opinion. We're going to slide those into the wall, just putting down a floor to see how far back they need to go. And then we'll add a metal frame with the marquee beams for some realism, copy that across a few times so it feels like an actual entryway, and then fill in the gaps on either side with panel pieces. Above the doorway, I'm adding what will basically be a wall garden. I really want to emphasize the tropical aspect of this enclosure and this building, so this wooden box will hold a bunch of mulch and some tropical plants later on as well. Inside, we'll use the same marquee beams and some thin glass to create a window. And then because of the design of this building, plenty of doors so our staff can get around how they need to. Originally, the concept for the cassowary habitat was an aviary, and I didn't really want to give up on that, so I created this circular aviary on the side of the building so that I could combine it with the other idea I had in mind. Took a few tries, not gonna lie, the width of each wall wasn't quite 4 meters, so I had to fiddle around with multiple mesh and beam pieces, but I do think it turned out alright in the end. The mesh is quite large, so to help prevent injury to the cassowaries, which can sometimes get their heads or feet stuck in mesh, I covered up the bottom meter or so with some corrugated iron, bringing that metal feel into this portion of the enclosure as well. I also decided to add a secondary fence to keep guests from sticking their fingers in or throwing things through the holes in the mesh, using mostly painted rods, grassland poles, and the tool hook for this. I saw another creator, Charlie X Gaming, create something similar in a recent video and thought it was a very cool take on a fence. Basically, the tool hook holds up the rod as a railing to keep people back from the main fence. Looks quite realistic. I've seen these sorts of fences in real life too, and it just added a nice detail to the exterior. Going to recolor those a deep green to match the eventual tropical enclosure, and then we'll use our mud pillar trick to get that rotated around the entire circle. Just need to clean up a few walls that end up inside of our building, and there we go. Using the same fence, I outlined a secondary run for the cassowaries. To my knowledge, cassowaries can be pretty aggressive and even dangerous, and are usually kept solo, sometimes in a male-female pairing for breeding purposes. So I wanted a second enclosure to facilitate separating the cassowaries. This won't be visible to guests, but I like the idea of having two separate enclosures if need be, which is why the backstage is also split in two. To add a bit more detail to this guest-facing area, I put some tilted mesh at the top of the walls. I thought it gave it more of an aviary feel this way, a little more enclosed without fully meshing over the top. You can see here that I do this in iterations to make sure that things are lining up perfectly. First edit the original on one side, then on the other to make sure there are no pieces sticking out. And here comes our first cassowary. Neither the male nor the female have names, so I would love some suggestions in the comments. The purpose of placing the animals in already is, of course, to design the doorways and make sure that they can use them with their hitboxes. Carrying over that same corrugated metal and marquee beam look, but this time also using gutter pieces to create the sliding track and some hinges to make it look like the doors are attached to something inside of it. There will be some switches to automate the gates. Apparently cassowaries are some of the few birds that have killed humans in the past. They have this long dagger-like claw on their middle toe, and we would hate for something to happen to the SEZ keepers in charge of their care. Finally, we're going to get onto the planting. I really wanted this aviary to have a tall tropical tree as a centerpiece, and this strangler fig did not let me down. Adding some tropical rocks near the base that I will be covering with a bunch of strangler fig roots to make it look like the tree is shorter than it actually is. Wanted to make sure that it was still proportional to the enclosure size and the rest of the zooscape. We'll also be adding plenty of moss, epiphytes, and vines all over to make it a truly breathtaking centerpiece. But first, my struggle with terrain collision continues. I wanted to place down the forage enrichment at the base and bring up the terrain to hide the wooden sides, but no matter what I did, it just didn't want to let me move the terrain near the enrichment item. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, if it's just this file, but if you have any solutions, do let me know in the comments. I ended up placing down some path and placing the enrichment slightly sunken into the earth, but you can still see the wooden edges a bit through the terrain. We'll work those in as the foliage work continues. I also added a shallow pool of water on this side of the enclosure because cassowaries can be found in a wide range of habitats, including woodlands, swamps, mangroves, and even beaches, so this enclosure was an amalgamation of those various ideas. Placing some mangrove trees along the water's edge as well to give the cassowaries some more coverage. There will be a few more trees along the edges, but most of the foliage will be low growing for better guessed sightlines. To increase the foliage ratio, I'm covering the strangler fig with all sorts of things like basket ferns, staghorn ferns, bird's nest ferns, all the ferns, liana vines hanging down from branches of course, and the tetrastigma vines make for a great filler between the larger epiphytes. We also, of course, can't forget about everyone's favorite tropical coverage plant, the scaevola bush. They're so great for covering up empty spaces because of their sprawling leaves. And then we'll dot those with more low-growing ferns and palms to really bring this jungle to life. Since there is a massive tree here, I also made sure to add plenty of the tropical leaf litter. It really makes the space feel lived in and adds detail to the edges of the water and forage enrichment. And finally, we'll use some similar plants for this wall garden above the doorway, plugging up the small spaces with the lords and ladies plant. Seriously, such a great piece as well. Because of the slope of this roof, I had to make a custom one, but these rectangles worked perfectly. Just a small incline that will allow any rainwater to run off into the cassowary habitat to further add to the tropical and swampy vibes. Also built some skylights in above the educational space right at the front, and above the cassowary backstage on the far side. Speaking of backstage, I tried something new using the souvenir shop shelves to decorate. I've seen a few creators do this and it was so quick and easy to do. Also created some backstage props including a sink and table. Originally saw this method of using the portcullis beams and fan cables on the YouTube channel of a Spanish Planet Zoo creator, so make sure to check them out. Once those details have been figured out, it's time to clutter up the backstage as usual with tools, hoses, and all manner of boxes and crates and buckets. Still a few more steps to make sure this building is set into the zoo's landscape, so I stole the tiling from the entry plaza with some edit to make sure the plaster fits alongside this road. This is all plaster panels with the metal beams creating the divides, which will slide into place along the edges of the road as well. To break up the plaza, a small planter using the recycled metal girders in the same colors as the building decor. We'll fill that up with mulch quickly and then place this cassowary statue, which I absolutely adore, I think it's so fun, and then find the perfect fern-like tree to place alongside it. And it's finally time to let you in on the secret. In our educational space viewing window, we are actually going to be placing a hydroponics system so that the zoo can grow some of the food for its animals in line with the sustainable practices it is trying to promote. The transport of produce creates tons of carbon dioxide emissions, so this is just one way Sandstone Eco Zoo is attempting to practice what they preach. Vertical farms like this one are on the rise, and there's actually some very cool technology behind it. Because the plants are grown in such a controlled environment, receiving only the nutrients and light that are programmed into the system, the flavor profile of the plants can actually be changed. The color of the lights can affect the crispness of leaves, for example, and the nutrients channeled through the pipes can enhance the juiciness of the produce too. While this little farm won't be able to produce all of the plants needed to feed the animals at SEZ, it's a small step in reducing emissions. Just going to situate the hydroponics system into this room here, and I think it's time to check out our brand new cassowary addition. Walking up past the koala playground, we see our gorgeous aviary. So many sprinklers dotted around to make sure it stays lush and beautiful. I'm so happy with how this central tree turned out, it's absolutely stunning. And this front plaza is quite inviting, I think, brings the tropics out of the enclosure and into the guest space. Here's the educational building, a fake hydroponic system on the side to show guests exactly how this technology works. Plenty of education boards, some staff inside checking up on our plants. Here's a quick look at the secondary cassowary run, a little less lush than the front-facing one. Still a nice place for our male to hang out once we have some chicks at the zoo. And here are our cassowaries enjoying their tropical aviary. The journey through the tropics continues next time in the second part of this building. Stay tuned and I will see you next time. Bye.